Thank you so much for being here today. We weren't sure how many people were going to show up because we're doing like more of the virtual sessions for people who are far away, but we're so glad you're here. You almost feel almost every chair here, so that's super awesome. And hope you enjoy the banner, the stand-up banner we have. I hope you'll be a great advocate for our region, Northwest Arkansas. Feel free to take a picture next to it throughout the event or after. My name is Missy Liu. I'm one of the hosts for the event for the Northwest Arkansas Commercial Real Estate Meetup. We've been running for a little bit over 1 year and a half. Motto is to bring the world to Northwest Arkansas and let all the community benefit from this growth as well. I'm gonna pass this check-in sheet here along with a QR code here for our Facebook group if you're not part of it.
Which we're live streaming right now too.
Which we're live streaming to right now as well. So one for check-in, one for the group, where you can just look up by the name. If you can pass it along here. We want to make sure we have your information for our future events as well. About me, I'm the managing partner of Black Mission Capital. We're a private equity firm focused on helping high net worth executives and business owners passively invest into commercial real estate, building a consistent passive income. Just like my business partner, very six-figure pharmacist income as well. So I'm super excited about the growth in that area. So today, I want to also thank Mike Dooley, the Dooley Group with KW, Keller Williams, for sponsoring this location. We've been using their space for some time, and I love the camera setup because it allows just live streaming a lot easier. Now, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Brian Winters, let him introduce himself, and then introduce our speakers for today as well. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming tonight, and thank you guys who are joining us on the live stream as well. Tonight, I'm really excited to present our two speakers this afternoon. They have a ton of more experience than I do. I've been started invested about 8 years ago. Small multifamily, graduated into larger multifamily. I got into multifamily specifically because I didn't want to deal with tenants and toilets. I knew that multifamily had the property management built into the business model. And I thought that was a more passive way to be involved. But just because you have property management doesn't mean it's necessarily hands-off. Depending on the property management company, it's really depending on how hands-off or hands-on it is going to be. So Elevate started with Mike and Tessa as a CEO and CEO of real estate management company. We recruited, or Mike kind of put together the team of him and Tessa who have experience. I'm going to read a little bit off their experience here. Michael Davalos is seasoned professional multifamily real estate since 2001. Since 2010, he's been pivotal on the investing side, contributing to over $5 billion in real estate transactions. As the executive vice president of Nationwide Property Management Company for the past 5 years, he surpassed occupancy goals and optimizing expenses. Michael co-founded Elevate REM, leveraging his expertise in managing over 9,500 units. Tessa Frank, joining us as a COO of Elevate Real Estate Management. Her career spanned in 2009, has a ton of background in operations for market rate multifamily, and real estate license in North and South Dakota. He's had large teams manage multi-million-dollar projects, expanded into hospitality, and a hands-on leader. She successfully streamlined operations, reduced costs, and grown teams overseeing 5,000 units and 50 properties. So really excited to be partnering with these guys. They manage several of our assets, several of Elevate's assets. They are a separate company, Elevate Real Estate Management. So it's really exciting to see what they've done with the portfolio of ours that they've taken over. I wish they could take over all of our portfolio, but we have different partners in each deal, so we can't necessarily take that over. But something Elevate is doing with each new transaction is making sure if we're a partner on a deal, we have to have these guys managing because we've seen what they can do. And they have a ton of experience in third-party property management. So without further ado, Mike and Tessa.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for being here with us this afternoon. We're excited. It's our first time in Northwest Arkansas, so we're excited to meet all of you and get to see your market firsthand. We've looked at the deals here like watercolors of Centerton, and we've seen the demographics, and we get why it's such a great market to invest in. And Brian did the intros in the background on us, so I don't want to waste. I won't. I had a whole pretty. That was about 8 minutes of what I was going to talk about, so that saved me a lot of intro time. Second here.
We have control over this. So we're going to be talking about property management onboarding. So we actually are going to go backwards with this, or you did arrange.
Yeah, I rearranged them. Yep.
So
you can go to the next slide, which that's kind of a breakdown of what we want to talk about today. So we want intros of who we are, kind of what our backgrounds and why we're here talking to you guys today. I think it's important to understand that because we want to make sure, one of the big things I always talk about is referrals. It's the easiest way to find out if someone's good at their job. And you'd be surprised how many people don't do it. They're either embarrassed to ask for referrals, but it's for me become one of the most important and first things I ask somebody is like, can you give me the names of 3 people that are happy with your service? It's so simple. Nobody does it. It blows my mind how many people don't ask for a live referral, and it really just doesn't happen. And I think it's one of those easy things that you can do to save yourself some time and some pain. So that's kind of the intros of who we are. The property management is a people business. So this is kind of just the topic that I wanted to address, because it is one of those businesses. I mean, all businesses have a relationship and a people component, but it's really so important. Like the phrase, it takes a village. Like that's what it is to run a building. You're running a community. You know, they call them apartment complexes because they're so damn complex to run. Like the amount of things, and we're going to get into that with our onboarding Excel sheet, which is it's a simple Excel. It's about, I want to say 9 tabs on the bottom, and each of those tabs has anywhere from 40 to 60 items. And this is part of, you know, Tessa's world, where she's been in operations from every single aspect of it, and has really, over time, we've honed in this, what we call our onboarding checklist, just to make sure that before we take over the property, we're getting our ducks in a row. As we're taking over the property, we're not missing anything. And then obviously, most important, post-closing and ongoing for the life of that cycle of the property. We want to always make sure that we're always doing all of these things. And the only way to make sure you're doing that is to have a checklist and go back to it. So it's really that simple. You know, we tend to make really complicated things simple. You know, the old Einstein saying, anybody can make things complicated, but not everybody can make it simple. And never make it simpler. So on that topic, we've got the next slide, which will be kind of the organizing. That's where this kind of is. There's so much data to process. Organization is key. How do we stay in touch with our people? We'll go into that a little bit, which is essentially Tessa does every day a 5 to 15-minute huddle, which is a Zoom meeting. We get all the staff from all of our properties. Doesn't matter where they are. Everybody logs in at the same time, and that's how we all put a face to the names, and we all get to communicate with each other on a daily basis. We do victories. What were your victories from the day before? What items are you currently stuck on that you need somebody else's help? Something that you need an answer from somebody. We're here all live. Let's talk about it now. And then what's priorities for you for the day? And it goes very quickly so that people don't get frustrated with this huddle. And then
also do shout outs too. And it's a really good time for everybody to get to know each other. So that way, if I've got a property in South Dakota and they're seeing our Texas managers all the time, my property manager in South Dakota will actually call Texas for help. You know, so they really feel like they're working together instead of isolated on an island. And that's usually how property management is. I mean, you're stuck in an office on a property with the staff that you see every single day. And so I really try to make them feel like they're part of a team who've got other people to go to and through issues with.
The issue, as she puts it, of an island is huge, because any good company has culture. All the good companies have culture. It's something that's ingrained in them. You teach it to your staff from from it could be the porter, the part-time guy helping out, to your property manager, to us as the chief executives of the company. We have to practice what we preach, otherwise it doesn't stick. So we're very, very big on that. We kind of use out of our revenues that we make from the company. We have constant events that we're doing for the staff at the property level, and then on a regional level. So we do a summer event where we invite all of the property staff. We'll usually do it like on a Friday night so that we can get a hotel room for everybody. They get to hang out. You know, some of these guys don't go on vacations in that way. So to have a night out on a Friday, have a hotel room, they can bring their wife, their kids, hang out with the company outside of the office, talk about things. We usually make an event out of it. Like this year we did, what was it called? The hunt?
We did a scavenger hunt in Fort Worth and a bull fighting championship at the stockyard.
Yeah, so we took everyone to the stockyards. So we had a theme to it. We had a scavenger hunt. We broke up into 2 teams. Everybody has their objectives. It's competitive, but at the same time, you're getting to hang out with people you don't normally see. And culture is one of those things that you don't have a line item for that on your balance sheet or your financials. It just doesn't exist. But history has taught us, and we've seen it, that a company with engaged employees is phenomenally better than a company that does not have engaged employees. They're going to catch things faster. They're going to do things cheaper. They're going to feel part of something, as opposed to just a person checking a box showing up for work, right? We don't ever want that.
Time that you hire a property manager or a maintenance person or even a groundskeeper, it's 6 months where they're really learning that job. So you're not as efficient for the first 6 months. So just reducing that turnover is huge.
Yeah, turnover is one of our KPIs for us as executives. You'll hear us talk about KPIs and goal setting, because a lot of companies have goals and KPIs, but they don't take the time to explain to the person how they're going to get there. And I think that that's part of coaching and being a good leader of any company, is not just giving people goals, but showing them and explaining to them how they're going to achieve that goal, and then helping them get there. Like, we don't believe in somebody did. The only hard rule that we have is, like, if you make a mistake, come to us, let us help you fix it. If you make a mistake, you try to hide it, and you're not, that's something that we don't tolerate, because that is like a poison that spreads to everybody else. Someone else has to work harder because of something you did. That's going to have a a really exponential effect on the company and on the way people do things. So people make mistakes. We're not computers. We're humans. We're gonna mess up. It's gonna happen a lot. I mean, I make mistakes all the time. I'm constantly making mistakes, but we learn from them. The most important thing we don't do is make the same mistake twice, right? Like, it's okay to make a mistake. You make it twice, we're gonna probably call you out on it. Make it a third time, it's probably time to find another line of work. It probably isn't for you. Property management is not for everyone. That's the other number one thing that a lot of people think this job is for them, and it's not. It's a very people intense business. And if you learn anything from dealing with people, is that there's no shortage of surprises when it comes to dealing with people. The things that people can do to apartments, or the things that we see or we've seen in our career, it's shocking, to say the least. Like, some of this stuff will leave you aghast. Some of this stuff you just are surprised and you're like, wow, I never even thought of it before. So it keeps you on your toes, which is why, another funny thing, but like, no one's high school guidance counselor was like property manager, right? Like, it's not highly on the list of things. So you think about that, and that means that everyone that's landing in a property management position got there by chance. Like, very few people are like, I want to be a maintenance supervisor when I grow up. It's not a common thing you hear the way you hear other professions. So almost everybody that we encounter in our jobs, either their cousin was a property manager, or somehow, some way their life got them there. And that's one of the things that we think is kind of cool about our industry, because you have a lot of passionate people. Ultimately, if you do hire only A players, which we think we've come up with a pretty good interview process. Our interview process involves personality testing, which some people might think that's overkill. We pay for all these personality tests, but it's best to identify the person and their personality, because a lot of people try to fake something. They'll fake it till you make it saying, and you'll see a lot of people that they think they want to do something because they need that job, but they're actually not cut out for it. And I'd rather identify that in the beginning and then be like, you don't have the personality for this job, but you do have this personality and this might fit you better. And that's one of the things that we do that's a little bit above and beyond, that a lot of property management companies don't go through all that hassle. But slow to hire, quick to fire. It's one of the sayings that I have a couple of little quirky sayings that I say all the time, and that's one that I've had for a long time. We take a very long time with any position to vet them and make sure that we've hired the right person for that position. And by contrast, when somebody starts falling off the wagon for whatever the reason might be, obviously we try to help them and coach them, but we pretty much know when people are checked out, and we're very quick to cut that person out, because like I said, property management, it's a very team-oriented sport. There isn't a quarterback and a wide receiver. Everybody has to pitch in. You don't have this one person that's just the all-star and is going to carry your property. Your property is very much dependent. The property manager is relying on her leasing agent or her assistant manager. The maintenance supervisors are relying on his maintenance assistants and the guys to be there to help him. Can't do everything himself. And if you lose that team aspect of it, or there's this one bad apple that doesn't buy into what we're all doing, you'll start seeing that in the property level. Either we're showing up to work, maintenance orders not getting done, or occupancy.
I have a question. I know you also have in here, since we're talking about property management, it'd be great to hear from the room. How many of you have used property managers in the past? Was it a good experience?
Right.
And I'm not necessarily soliciting business for them or anything. Like, are you also looking for new property?
No, I forgot. That was going to be my lead off thing. I completely forgot, because I did want to get a gauge of the room of like, what's the level of experience with property management companies, and just like a show of hands of how many of you have had to hire a property management company in the past. A little less than half the room. So the rest of you are essentially looking to get into this and understand what the different pitfalls are, which is good for you guys. That's, it's obviously a way to do it. Learning the hard way is you learn, but it's expensive. But you do learn the lesson, but it costs you some money before the lesson hits home. So we've got about half the room here. Is anybody currently looking for a property management company? And the reason I asked is that kind of segues into what your experience was, and if there was anything that we would essentially, we advocate always three things: referrals, sample reporting, and the background of the owners themselves. Like who are they and what have they done in the past? Because if they've done it before, then it's probably pretty good. Reporting, we have financial reports that are over 400 pages, because some of those deals have institutional investors. The institutional investors really want every single possible thing, and we give it to them. We can make the reporting 2 pages, we can make it 500 pages, but we can do it, and we have no issues doing it. And the second most important, the most important part about reports when it comes to multifamily apartments is, number one, are they accurate? Because if you have inaccurate data, it's useless. So it's got to be accurate. Like, we have no tolerance for inaccuracy when it comes to accounting. Tessa's really on top of that with our staff accountants, and we double check all the numbers every month. We're closing our books on the 2nd of the month. We're getting our reports out on the 15th to the 18th, depending on weekends. But so far, a year and a half in, and we're very proud to say that every single one of our properties has had accurate reporting delivered on time. For a new company, that was really big for us, because I've seen how that takes a back seat to, well, yeah, the report was late, but look, your property was doing good at the end of the day. And for me, it's kind of like wearing a really nice suit with a giant stain on it,
Well, every single property management company that I've ever worked for did not deliver financials on time. and it drove me nuts.
Yeah.
So when we started this, that was one of my main things is I want them on time and accurate. And I want to see a bunch of weird things in these line items that don't make sense for other people's properties. I've seen that before. Unless you're going through that line by line, there's always a lot of surprises in there. So this is my baby.
So go 2 slides ahead, because I think well, we can actually start.
No,
with
this is
this is
good.
fine. This is the
Yeah.
beginning of the template. I was gonna show them the tabs at the bottom, but we'll do that on the second screen. And I'll let you run through your worksheet, or you want me to?
No, it's fine. So this is just the very first page of the Excel that I use to onboard properties. It basically gives you everything you could want to know about the property. If you go on to the next page, because that's just the top of the page. And then it goes on to your mechanical systems, rent premiums, fire suppression systems, parking spaces, storage, everything. Keep going.
So here, I'm kind of just highlighting, this is a tab, this is the marketing tab. So
Yeah.
here's the marketing setup.
And this is kind of backwards, but normally okay, so this is the very first tab. This is your operations tab.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, I know this is really hard to see, but you're looking at 90 days before takeover, kind of having those first conversations about, okay, are we going to get this property? We need to get lender approval to change management companies, or even we have it under contract and we might be raising money for it or something like that. So really, when that's happening, you should have your property management company involved at that point, because there is a lot of things that need to happen. So all of these little things, I have them also on a timeline. Perfect world, 90 days before takeover. We can take over a property in 2 weeks if we had to. It's not going to be the cleanest takeover, but we can make it happen. It's just software typically takes 30 days at a minimum, 30 to 45 days to actually get dialed in and correct. So if you want to go.
Yeah, go back one more to
Yeah,
the bottom.
go back.
So what I wanted to highlight here is kind of the first tab we saw with the name and all that. So that's property facts. Then we go to operations, which we're only showing about 70% of that tab, which is the other one. There's still a whole bunch of other items on the bottom. And it's just, again, it wasn't to get too much into the weeds. We can happily do that. But it was, the idea was to just show like how much goes into a takeover, because it's utilities, it's contracts, and all this information has to be looked at. If you're not looking at it, it's like measuring something. If you don't measure it, you can't make it better. It's the same concept. If you're not looking at it and documenting it somewhere, it means somebody missed it. And that means that 3 months, 2 months later.
It's okay to ask for some sort of onboarding checklist from a property management company. They should be able to tell you how they're going to manage all of this stuff in a cohesive way. If they can't do that, and they just say, oh, well, you know, we have this person works on this and this person works on this, it's really not enough, because all of these things have to come together in order for day one you take over. You've got staff there, your marketing's all on par, your software's up, you know, I mean, it's really, you can't.
You got the marketing,
wait a
so
couple
this is
weeks.
everything involved with marketing, which is all the different websites that you want to have your property pushing to, all the different social media pages, all of these things have to be, someone's got to do it. It's minutia details, but it's got to get done. And then at the end, we've got contract setups, which is any contracts on the property, whether it be trash, landscaping companies, you name it, right? There's going to be some contracts, some might not, some of this stuff. On some of our properties, we're able to do this in-house with the staff. We save some money by not having to use contract, but that's really property and area dependent. Utility setups is another one it can be a pain point, because some properties could have, what do we have on counties, 32 utility numbers? Or like 42 account numbers for utilities, one property, but there's over 42 buildings. There's over 42 bills coming into this one property, because every single building has its individual meters, and there's a lot of buildings, and you don't want to miss any of those. And not only do you not want to miss the bills, but you also don't want to miss if you're being overcharged, which happens like crazy. Be surprised how often people get overcharged in gas, water, and electric bills, because if no one's looking, they're charging it, someone's paying it. And a lot of times it's errors. A lot of times it's a malfunctioning meter. A lot of times it's a funny story that I'll share. I like to drop little personal stories, but we had a property in Tampa that we were managing once, and this one building is doing like 50% more water than all the other buildings. So we know there's a leak. Send the guys out there, you know, typically this happens, and you send your guys out there and you're listening for toilet leaks or water running behind the walls. But you walk around, don't find any leaks in this building. Another month goes by, still 50%. So it's driving me crazy. So at this point, I'm like going door to door. And finally, I don't know what happened, what conversation with one of the guys that I'm talking to. And the guy explains to me that what he was doing was running his shower as a sound machine at night. So we identified the problem. We finally figured out what it was. But this guy was like, the water's free. I don't pay for it. What do you mean? And that's what he was doing. He was going to sleep at night, and he was turning on his shower, and then he would go to sleep with his shower running. So like I said, the things people surprise you with in properties, but that's just one example of like having a checklist, doing what we call, you know, utility audits essentially on the properties, and having a utility management in place will save, you know, won't save you from that guy, because that's a one-off, and that really required like another level of just analness from me to find it. But those are the types of things that you want to be on the lookout for. People hook up to buildings all the time, and you know, we have one guy running a car wash business, And nobody knew because he was doing it discreetly. But ultimately, there was one building, the meter was always off, and comes out this guy was hooking up his hose. And on weekends, when there was no staff at the property, he would wash 20, 50 cars on Saturdays and Sundays. And that was another thing that we finally caught by putting some extra stuff in. But, you know, you really do see all sorts of interesting things. And that's not even getting into like the illegal stuff that people do on properties. This is just the stuff that's kind of like border, like, you know, technically nothing wrong with it. But so then from utilities, you go into accounting, which is the different financial things that we're looking for from the accountants, HR, who we're hiring, who's on the property right now, staffing. I can't say it enough. You live and die with your staff at your property. You can make the best performer, be in the best market, have everything going your way, but put a bad property manager on a property and your property's going to fail. That is your executor of your business plan. The person that's going to make things happen is going to be your property manager, right? Like at the end of the day, the best deals will go bad without the right staff at the property. And that's why we make such a huge emphasis on staffing, because it's that people component. You know, value add, deferred maintenance, that's the tab where we're trying to already identify with ownership what we've noticed that needs to happen right away, and then value add the things that we would like to see done that we think are low hanging fruit and increase value in a property, whether it's landscaping or painting or anything of that nature. And deferred maintenance would be, you know, sidewalks that are cracked and broken, property needs the striped and sealed in the parking lots, or anything that we notice is just, this hasn't been done, it's way overdue, let's budget for it. And then obviously we have the budget, which is what we prepared for the property. We have the CapEx budget, which is what's expected from ownership for future CapEx repairs that they plan on doing. And then ultimately, last, we like to collect the pro forma from ownership, just so we can see what they're predicting for down the road and how closely aligned we all are. And that's essentially the onboarding template that this sheet has been getting better and better, because as we keep using it, we keep finding things. And that's the other, I think, big takeaway with property management is don't ever stop learning. It's like being a doctor and constantly learning, or being a lawyer and learning about new laws and new things. It's no different in property management. You're constantly learning new things and you're finding out new things. And if you have that attitude and your property management company has that attitude, you know, you're going to do pretty well. I guess we can go to the next slide from here. So that's the organized team building. You talk about team building.
So did you guys buy the guy sound machine for Christmas?
No, we evicted him. No, we just told him what was going on and how much we were paying for it. And he was like, he literally thought it was free. He was like, oh, no, we don't pay for water here. I'm like, no, I do. But his whole thing was just completely innocent. He was the nicest guy, as an older gentleman. It could not have been nicer about it. You know, it was just like, oh, water's free. And I really like the sound of sleeping too. It's like, yeah, there's cheaper alternatives. You know, there's an app on your phone you can have for that. Yeah, so I think, you know, the rest of my stuff is just touching on the slides. I mean, just mentioning
Let's go through stabilize, takeover.
Yeah, so we try to figure out like how do we make this a little bit more interactive with you guys. Like, you know, you take over property, you always have to do the same things, right? So there's two types of takeovers. There's a purchase when you're buying a brand new property, you're changing hands one owner to the next, and then there's just, I'm not happy with my management company, I want to transition to a new management company. So those are usually the two circumstances that we see of a takeover. Those two circumstances will come, they'll either be amicable or what word did we use? Hostile takeovers. Obviously, you want it to be amicable. It's nice when you can take over. You discover something, you can call the owner, the previous manager, and get answers for these things that don't make sense. That's always the perfect world, right? But we don't live in a perfect world, and things happen. So we've done it all. We've done no communication at all. We've done, hey, I pulled the staff yesterday. I have nobody there today. I need you guys there today. Like, show up because this office is going to be closed. So we've done everything far and few in between. It happens sometimes. You know, I saw a management company that was part of a deal get really upset, and as his way of fighting with his partners, he just pulled all the staff one day to the next. What do you do, right? Like, these things happen. So here we kind of just outline some of these differences. This is obviously in a stabilized, amicable, perfect world. We're looking at 30 to 45 days of a takeover timeline. You know, as far as gathering staff on site, tour the property. Operational differences, obviously less chaotic when you don't have that situation. Software migration reports are cleaner. This is essentially all softwares use CSV files to communicate with each other. So you're essentially downloading different CSV files for all these different things that are within the software. The lease names, what their terms are of the lease, how long, deposit money, fees, all these things are in that software, as well as how long they've been there. So the software has different sections of it where you can download these CSV reports and upload them into our software. No matter how hard we try, it always gives you errors because it's two different softwares trying to communicate with each other. You can put a period in the wrong place and you get an error for 550 different entries. You got to go back and figure out, oh, was this period that's out of place, deleted on all of them. And it's a trial and error process, but that process is so much easier when you can still keep getting new reports from the old company. If they shut you off, you can see how that's kind of like you're just literally just freestyling it and doing it on your own. AP is cleaner, so this is like who do they owe money to. What happens when you don't have that is a month after takeover, which has happened to us. We've discovered invoices in one property of like $60,000 something. in a folder somewhere that the previous property manager was getting bills from plumbers, electricians, HVAC people, landscaping people, people that came to paint. And as the bills would come into the property, you're supposed to input them into our software. That triggers the accounting to know there's an invoice. They send the check and pay it. Well, she decided it was a lot easier to just put it in a drawer and forget about it.
That's not even abnormal unless they're staying on board with us. They check out, they know they're gonna go to another property, they know they're either not gonna have a job or something's gonna happen. And so you usually find, depending on the property size, a certain amount of AP, $10,000-$20,000, but.
Which as if you think about that, what that means, right? You're buying a property, you don't think this $60,000 or $100,000 of bills exist, so you think you're $100,000 in the green, and now you realize, oh, I actually don't have this extra $100,000 because it's owed to somebody.
Wasn't reflected on their financials for the last 6 months, so then you really don't know what you're getting into because there's a lot of expenses that weren't accounted for.
So that's one example of like a bad AP coming through with bad relationship, bad manager. It's like Tessa said, it's really. It's hard to catch that, but what happens is we've been doing it long enough that we can almost anticipate this coming because we meet the manager. We can already tell there's something off with this management company. We can tell there's something not right here. Something won't feel right. Something will be off in the way they answer questions. You can already tell the person's checked out. A lot of that comes down to, for lack of a better word, intuition. Like you're meeting this property manager.
Too. Like I can look at financials for the last 12 months and say, okay, this property management company is doing pretty well. All of their their financials are actually where they should be. Their contracts aren't all over their place. The utilities aren't all over the place. When you're seeing huge variable gaps in financials where you've got, landscaping, and then it's missing for 2 months, that goes kind of in those lines of an unstabilized property. But typically with stabilized, I've looked at, the financials for the last 12 months and you're seeing something in every category. There's not a huge variance. There's not all of a sudden, $20,000 bill when there was nothing for the last 3 months. So it's pretty easy to pick up that too.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we do as taking over properties is when we get the financials from the previous company, we scan it for anomalies. So we have an analyst that works with our company full time. He's the number cruncher. He will take the Excel, we'll overlay it with another Excel, and we'll just start comparing and looking for anomalies and it'll highlight in red. It'll create these highlights within the cells for anything that stands out as being abnormal for previous months. We can then identify that there's an anomaly and dig in further to see why. It's usually contract services, like Tessa said. It's usually going to be a contractor that there's been nothing, that all of a sudden there's a bill and then there's nothing again for a while. So you can catch it because it'll be utilities, it'll be something in R&M, or they'll usually bury it in one of those 3 or 4 line items. The next one is staffing is stabilized. Sorry, I was going to run through the rest of the last ones on this one, which is staffing is stabilized as well. Obviously, it's nice to have a property that's fully staffed. You don't have to hire anybody, and they've already been working together. That's the ideal scenario. Most times when you take over property, I shouldn't say most times because it's pretty much 50-50, like whether or not they're going to keep their staff or they're going to leave them there. Because if you think about it, unless they own another property and that property is missing staff, what do you do with the staff of this property? Where are you putting it? So that's also something that historically you're going to cherry pick your best employees. You're going to say, I don't know what I'm going to do with this person, but this person's a rock star. I'm keeping him. I'm going to find him a place because that's normally what companies do with good employees is they create opportunities for them within the companies. So you're usually going to find the key A players are going to go with the property. And that's something that we always, no matter what, we go into every deal assuming we're going to lose everybody. So we right away, we say, how would we don't care about we care about what's there, but we start first with how would we run this property? How would we do it? We put out those positions right away within that 30 to 90 day period. So we're already getting the applications and the people coming in. And then we interview the current staff. We find out who's going to stay, who's going to go. We have a list of who's staying, and we compare that to the new applicants. And then we decide from there who we're going to keep on board and who we're not. This way we know that we're building out our A team at the property and not just inheriting a bunch of C players from the previous ownership, which is not what we want for any of our ownerships or our properties. Communicating with prior management is amicable. This I explained that that's awesome because when you notice something's wrong or something weird is happening at the property, you can pick up the phone and talk to them still. And that's obviously a big help. Financial reporting accuracy and timeline, more accurate financial reporting true up. This is the point of catching up from the previous month to the new month and going forward and having all that. If you have all the information from the past, then it obviously will tie in with your current info and go forward a lot cleaner. Current financials are usually in less than 45 days if we have all of these things. If not, it could take up to 60 days if we're still hodgepodging things and connecting items as they're coming in to build out the financials. This is the first report. It's typically a 45-day lead window because you take over the property. You want to run it for a full 30 days first. So you've got a 30-day sample of the property, then put out the report 15 days later from that. So that's kind of why the 45-day lead time for that very first report to come out. And then after that, they're basically on the 15th.
First of the month.
Yes, never take over the first of the month.
Month, so and then you kind of have a very partial month, and then you have your full month. That's what the produce after 45 days.
Yeah, that's another very, very important. You don't want to take over the last week of the month. You don't want to take over the first week of the month. There's too much happening in between those times. So it's the middle of the month. It's calmness. Everyone's paid their rent. it's just transitioning the software and that's it. You don't have a bunch of rent checks coming in or going to the previous company and then having to get back to you. So it just helps to make it a lot cleaner. We've learned in our experience. We always try to do the takeover if we can in the middle of the month. So then what happens when you have an unstable situation? Well, the takeover time is sooner. We might have to be there the next day or within 15 days. We say 15 days because that's really the minimum that it takes to get all that data into our software. So from the moment that we know something's happening, we get a rent roll, we get the financials, we start building from those models, our own models that we can then put into the system. But that's anywhere from a 7 to 14-day process to get that all uploaded into our software. More turbulent, in-depth marketing setup, staffing typically takes a little longer to place and train because like I said, you're probably doing all the stuff from scratch with everybody. AP is not clear, as we mentioned on that, missing contracts, your contracts are missing, you don't know where they are. The software migration will take longer because you're either not getting full reports from them, it's not being fed into the system the right way. The surprises are a lot higher. You're going to find stuff when you take over a hostel property, you're pretty much going to be getting surprises every week for the next 30 days. And that's why that first 30 days is so critical when you take over any property. But we're extra prepared for surprises when it's a hostile situation because you just don't know what's going to pop up or what's going to walk through your front door with what bills. And the financial reporting true up will take longer because of that same reason. You're trying to justify the ledgers from all the tenants and everything else, just takes a little bit longer. And then you have, if you take over stabilized property and we take it over, we don't see a hiccup. Like some management companies I've seen in the past where they take over the property, the first 45 days, there's always a 5% dip in occupancy, staffing, something. When we've taken over stabilized assets, it's just completely kept running like seamlessly. Nobody could tell there was even a difference. That's the difference with a nice takeover. When you have a hostile takeover or something like that, you usually can't avoid that bump in occupancy or something because they stopped working 30, 45 days before we ever took over. So it's not necessarily that we don't hit the ground running, but it's that you're hitting the ground running and you're showing up Monday for the race that was ran Saturday. It is what happens in a hostile takeover.
Go ahead.
What entices you guys to acquire these unstabilized properties?
Good question. So typically it's opportunity.
Okay.
People don't, the more unstabilized and the more hair a deal has on it, it usually doesn't sell for the top price. It's going to be harder for that guy to get top dollar when he can't produce certain reports or produce certain things. When you go tour the property and it doesn't show well, all of these things are going to hit your price. It's no different than selling your home. That's the one thing I would say that they sort of have in common is obviously your curb appeal and having everything. You go to buy a house and the guy's like, here's an inspector report. It plasters everything with flying colors. No problem.
But for us as a management company, again, it's opportunity. We can say, hey, we're going to charge more for this property, even if it's the first 6 months. And then after that, maybe level out a little bit more because we know that it's going to be a heavy lift. We know that all these things are going to come up. So for us, yeah, I mean, and there are properties we won't take.
We've said no to a lot. I mean, we've been very selective with our growth. We probably could have had over 2,000 units, but we right now are sitting about just over 1,000. But that's strategic. We're small and efficient company, and we can't afford to just say yes to everybody. We're not the cheapest management company out there, but I explain to people, we're talking about 3% or 4%, right? Most people want to do it for 3%. We don't do it for really less than 4%. And when you look at a budget of a property, you're talking about millions of dollars of budget. Do you really care whether you pay somebody $5,000 a month or $7,000 a month? That's usually the difference that we're talking about. And when you talk about what we do and what goes into protecting this, tens of millions of dollars that are invested in this deal, do you really care whether you're paying a management company $5,000 or $10,000? I don't. I want to pay. I don't want money. I was another saying. I don't mind spending money. I hate wasting it. I'll spend money gladly on things of value, and I'm getting my value out of it. I have no problem paying for things. I hate wasting my money. So I don't want to pay a company $10,000 as opposed to I could have gotten it for $5,000, and then that company does a terrible job. That would be very upsetting. But if you pay for something and you get a quality product out of it, especially that's your hard-earned money, your millions of dollars invested in something. For me, I've never lost that conversation. That's my argument to people, and they usually say, "He has a point." And then, and if we ever do a job, I don't ever want to work somewhere where I'm not wanted. So it's also not like we're locking people into contracts and saying, "Well, tough, we're here for a year." Like, if ever we're not doing a good job, we open that communication. We'd be the first ones to say, we're screwing this up. Like, we need to bring somebody else. Like, we wouldn't be those types of people. It's never happened. Not to say it can't happen for whatever reason, but it's never happened to us. And we're usually the type of people that if we say something, we're going to do it and we're going to follow through.
Well, and we're very careful with what we're taking too. Like, I will not take on more than I know that I can handle. And we have had conversations where it's like financially, okay, this makes sense. But for me, if I'm the one out there and I'm, on the ground with the staff and I know that I'm going to be too thin, then that doesn't make sense, because what I don't want to do is say, yes, we're going to do this, we're going to turn this around, we're going to manage as well, and then not do a good job.
Great question.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of ratios that, X amount of doors, you need X amount of staff, you can self-manage up to, I'm just curious what.
So usually it's 1 for every 100. So you have 1 maintenance person and 1 tech. for every 100 units. It varies a little bit for class. A class is fine. C class, you might need, 1.25. And that also depends on, you could have a rock star manager that can manage 170 units by themselves without an issue. But again, that really has to do with class too.
Yeah, the class of the property, the demographics of where it's located, and the age of the property, those three things are going to ultimately and most importantly, the quality of the person that you're hiring at the property. Some managers or owners will not want to pay a property manager more than 40,000 a year for whatever reason, or it might be at 35, which is
You're not gonna get a good property manager.
never. And if you think about it, where we are today as a society, like, do you want to hire the guy that makes minimum wage? Again, it goes back to the same thing. Good things aren't cheap and cheap things aren't good. So you really get what you pay for. Do we overpay? No. We're very adamant about being fair. I think that's what we strive for, because you're never going to make everybody happy all the time. It's impossible. But we know it's fair. We've been doing this long enough to understand, and we look at it as economies. Like we have properties in Rapid City, South Dakota. Believe it or not, there's a high cost of living there now. It used to be extremely cheap, but it's gotten expensive. The housing market has gotten expensive. So you can still have a nice dinner and wine for $150, but your rent has gone from $600 to almost $1,200 over the course of 4 years. That hits everyone's pockets equally. So things like that, we're sensitive to it, and we look at the markets of where they are. We look at the housing. We see what other people are hiring on Indeed. We do our homework. We're on Indeed. We're a small company with a very large budget, and the things we do are the same things that any major nationwide management company would do. As Tessa mentioned before, we had the company we worked at before, we were handling 10,200 something, almost 12,000 units at some point. We sold a 2,000 unit portfolio halfway into that, but we had close to 12,000 apartments in 5 different states. And what was nice about that was that we really got to see what works and what doesn't. And some people will tell you it's better to learn what doesn't work first and right away know everything that doesn't work. And this way you're not trying to like reinvent that wheel anymore. Like we already know from experience, like what works, what falls apart, where the chinks are in the armor, if you will. And that's why we're very strategic about how we're growing this company now, because we've seen what happens when you grow too fast. We've seen what happens when you take on properties and you just are on a race to zero to get the deal for the least amount of money. And now you have a property that doesn't make you any money. You're frustrated. If you look at what's been happening around the country with some of these nationwide companies that have been buying up smaller companies, that's the crux of their issue is that they're absorbing these contracts that these other people had for 2% and 2.5%. They're realizing I can't give you any support because I'm not making any money. So then you leave the staff to just kind of flounder around and figure it out. And they're not getting support from the regional or from the corporate level staff because there's no money to fly a regional there. Our properties have usually an allocation for travel budget. And again, it sounds crazy, you're flying, but you're going to have the CEO and the COO at your property for a week. Yeah, it might cost you $2,000, but we also we're not talking about 10 unit or 50 unit properties here. We're talking about 400, 200 unit properties with $5 million budgets. So if you spend $2,000 in 1 month to fly both of us to your property, it's good. It's a very good thing. And a lot of times people will say, well, this other company doesn't ask for travel. And I'm like, yeah, but they're not sending their CEO there. You don't have anybody of an executive level at your property training this staff. So think about it. Who's training that staff? Who's walking them through their issues? How do you handle this? Like, that's something that we do personally. And we realize we can't do that forever because eventually we'll get too big, but we can easily handle it for at least the next foreseeable future until we have someone that's our regional director that we've personally trained that's now doing what we've done. But those are some of the little things that it becomes hard when it's the same principles on a smaller property, just on a different scale, right? You still want to have a good quality person training. It doesn't matter if it's 10 units or if it's 1,000 units. You still need a good quality manager and a good quality technician that's responsible, that knows how to fix things efficiently, and that's going to show up to your job and not leave people hanging. Because ultimately that's what it is, right? It's showing up to your job. There's a maintenance order that needs to get done. Is that guy going to show up today, or is he one of those people that's always calling in sick? And now it burdens the second maintenance guy that is at work every day, but he's upset because he's doing 20 maintenance orders instead of 10. And every time he walks into an apartment, he's getting yelled at by a tenant that I've been waiting 3 days. That does affect it would affect anybody's psyche if you're hearing that kind of stuff. And if you think about it, that's what our guys are going through on the ground on a regular basis if they don't have the team cohesion there at the property level. So kind of just throwing up here some of the these are kind of just all, I added some things. We had this slide before and I just added some of the different post takeover and ongoing housekeeping items. The unit walks is another thing that we do once a year. We should have seen the inside of every single apartment at least once a year. It's a very low bar, but it's an important bar to set. And you'd be surprised how many companies don't do that. I mean, yeah, I think this is actually the last one.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to have a call for offer on there. I forgot. But unit walks are so things that we can do going forward. This is kind of like guidelines of things that we do. These are what we call housekeeping items, ongoing things, post takeover. But essentially, unit walks, I think we think it's extremely important because a lot of times we've taken over property and we've asked the ownership, like, when was the last time a unit audit was done? Huh? Never been done. How long have you owned this for? 3 years. 3 years, you haven't been inside your apartments? What if one of those apartments, who knows what's going on, right? It's your
There's
building.
always something. I mean, we do it every year at all the properties.
At very least, once a year, once a unit, any management company worth their salt should really be doing that for you and telling you that they have a good bill of health, that you catch leaks when you do this, you catch broken appliances when you do this. A lot of times,
Your income because you find a bunch of pets when you do it.
yeah, you'll see they have pets and they weren't declaring pets, so you notice things like that. It's true.
The day before it happens, they're just hauling them off and boards the property.
Like, oh no, someone's coming. But no, we've uncovered a lot of things, or like, 8 people living in 1-bedroom apartments or things like that. And you don't know that if you don't do these unit by audits. So we really recommend once a year, at minimum, once a year. I know some people do it once a quarter. I think that's overkill and a little invasive for the tenants. But I think once a year is a very respectable number that anybody should really be doing. Other thing is, obviously, every position in the company has KPIs. Myself, I have my KPIs. Tessa has KPIs. Everybody has a KPI. That's how we kind of, number one, it's rewarding. Nobody wants to show up and not know they're accomplishing goals. Like, it's what keeps us going, is knowing that we're checking that next box, getting to that next level. What am I going to do next week? So everyone has their KPIs. They're obviously different depending on the property and the position, but they have their KPIs. Their immediate manager goes through the KPIs with them, and most importantly, make sure they understand what the KPI is and do they understand how they're going to achieve it. If they can understand that, right, it's pretty much job's done. They just got to get it done at that point. But we do make sure that we have KPIs and clear goals and achievable goals. The rentable item audit, what's that one? I was going to ask you what that meant.
So rental item, you've got garages, carports, things like that.
Ah,
A lot of
accessory
times
items,
we
okay.
Take over property if they're a disaster. So that's one of the very first things to make sure that, we're not losing any money there, that all the garages are actually being paid for, carports assigned. Sometimes properties have washer and dryers that are rentable items. So we make sure all those are recorded.
I actually have a horror story about that, just so that you guys know.
Please share.
I was a property manager and we did a item check and they found a deceased body that's been missing for like several months.
Oh,
gosh.
It's part of it.
key audits, full residential file audits, that's going through the file, making sure the lease is there, that it's signed. I mean, we took over a property a year ago that out of 190 something units, 190 something leases were missing, wrong, the files weren't there, signatures weren't there. And then, one of the things that we do, once we see that, then we go through like, oh, we got to do a full audit, right? So now we're going to do a full ledger audit. We're going to go through the Entrada system and pull everything, make sure the billing's been accurate for as long as we can at least tell. We uncovered when we did that with that property, those missing leases, we uncovered that tenants were being charged things they shouldn't be getting charged. Some of them were being, there was no rhyme or reason. Some of them were being charged fees that they never signed up for. Some of them had cheaper things that they were supposed to be paying and it was cheaper. There was literally no rhyme or reason. It was just errors everywhere. So when that happens, there's no other way to do this. You got to go lease by lease, unit one. So when that happens, one of the first things we do is we stop. A lot of, and this is again goes down to like, if you're only making 2%, they're not going to do that. They're going to, well, this is what I inherited. I'm just going to keep it going because no one noticed so far. So we'll just keep kicking this can down the road, right? We right away. We'll tell ownership, this is what we've uncovered. Because of this, we recommend a full audit. Full audit takes us anywhere from an entire week, depending how many units there are, but it could take us 8 hours a day, 5 days a week with 3 people working on it. That's what we had to do the last time on site. They had no paper files, so we were a giant file cabinet with every single lease. Pull one, go to the software. We have a checklist that we were using for Excel, go through each of the items to see what's wrong, what's not. We had to do that for every single file. It was 8 hours a day for 5 days. Didn't get paid anything extra for it, but we can't do our job right if we don't do this. So it didn't really matter what the money was. It was just no other way for us to do our job the right way and know we're doing it the right way. So that's one of the things that we also are really big on is auditing. We also do lease audits when we take over a property, when we're buying something new. We'll do the same thing. We'll get all the leases, we'll get the rent rolls, compare them to each other to make sure there isn't any discrepancies. And then we also, if the seller provides it to us, they'll usually give you their bank statements for the last 12 months. Well, you have your T12 for the last 12 months. You can match up expenses with income and see that they're not, fudging the numbers or whatnot. So that's the full contract audit, essentially going through all their contracts and seeing, what they're doing, what they're paying for services. Can we save any money there? The utility audit, same thing, going through all the different utilities. Does that make sense for the market that they're in? Is it too much? Is it too little? What's going on there? And finally, market analysis and pricing. When I finally put the second one, that one's huge. That's basically us. We've created our own way of, everybody does market surveys. Not everybody does them the same way. We do our market surveys where we first determine, is this a hostile market or is it a friendly market? Friendly markets means like, you're going to have rapport with the other property managers. There's usually interaction of information. You usually don't, it's market by market. They're all completely different. Some markets, the property managers become friendly with the property managers.
Something that we encourage too. So my property managers, I want them to go out and actually meet the comps, not just secret shop them. They go to lunches together and, and then that way when they're actually sharing information, it's accurate. We can call them and ask them questions that a lot of other companies can't because they do have that rapport with them. So every week they do a market survey and then we also do CoStar market analysis too.
And that's huge because what happens is a lot of times, and I've seen this before, you have a disengaged employee calling another disengaged employee, and they're just giving each other BS information. What's your guys' occupancy? 98. What's your guys? 97. Cool. Talk to you next month. And they hang up. And they're actually at 92% and offering concessions. We're actually,
It's really important too, to not just go off of CoStar, because you do have to pick up the phone, because CoStar is usually not accurate.
most of the time.
We don't like that.
Oh. To CoStar's defense, it's the same thing. CoStar spends the majority of their money on pace. And they're the best at seeking out information and getting it. But the data is only as good as, it's garbage in, garbage out. If somebody gives you good data, you're capturing good data. Somebody gives you bad data.
They're running.
Syndicated data is live, so anything that's coming from a third party feed, we're getting apples to apples information directly from.
Like if it's Morningstar or.
No, from like Entrata, Yardi, from like the property data, we actually have all the true occupancy and information that updates every like 30 minutes to our database.
But we would have to opt into that, I guess, is that how that works?
From the property management software file. Yeah, so we gather all that data.
I mean.
Oh, but like, we're not putting into their.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah,
Like, in other words,
if they're sandbagging like.
I guess the question is, does the
Like,
management
stuff,
company,
then it's incorrect.
does the management company opt in and give you access to their files essentially?
Well, that's the give and take. If they are wanting to have all their information up to date on their ad on apartments.com.
They'll just give you guys access to it. Got
Yeah,
it.
because that's the give and take.
Because they own apartments.com, so they're getting the leasing data from apartments.com. Okay.
And same thing with everything else, from
Yeah.
MLS and all the commercial stuff.
It's one of those things where, yeah, we find, and I guess it's really like market dependent. Like South Dakota CoStar data, it's a little harder to get accurate data. And it could be that most people probably aren't tapped into that network because it's South Dakota. They probably are still marketing on the newspaper or something. But they're still like putting ads out somewhere. But yeah, like again, it's just the point of the whole moral of the story is you want accurate data, and there's ways of getting accurate data. And we think that we found the best way is to build a relationship with the other managers. Like Tessa says, we encourage our managers to take them out to lunch, to get to know them, become friends with them so that they're openly sharing information, as opposed to what I find most people do is a once a month phone call and they jot down their numbers and then they're done. And maybe it's accurate, maybe it's not. Hard to tell, but if you are building that relationship and actually visiting these properties, you have a better chance of getting better data. And that's just something that we've encouraged our property managers to do. Visit, build rapport with them. They have an expense card, take them out to lunch if you need to, spend $50 on lunch and you get access to good data. All day I would do that deal. And it's important because we've identified, and like right now, it's happening in one of our properties in Rapid City where we identified, I think, way earlier than other people, that the market was softening up already, and we noticed declines in other people's occupancy, and we noticed concessions starting to get offered. And we started picking that up 4 weeks ago. Our property is still at 96% occupied. The comps are at 90%. And the comps are in our area, they're all identical properties. But the difference being we got way more aggressive with our marketing and way more aggressive with our specials way earlier. So this is also a very reactive business. 90% of, I don't want to make up a statistic here, but no, I know I just did. Like I gotta catch myself. 60% of statistics are made up, by the way. Just like that one I just did. A lot of people just they're reacting to stuff. The property management business is built to be reactive. It's not built to be proactive. Problem happens, they solve it. Problem happens, they solve it. We try as hard as we can, and we really try to be proactive because we've been doing it so long that you've been doing anything long enough, you can start to see the hurdles forming in front of you before they happen. And that's something that we have. And because we communicate very closely with our staff, amongst ourselves, with my experience over the last 23 years being in real estate, I've only been in commercial real estate since I graduated high school. I've been a mortgage broker and a licensed realtor. That was the first half of my career. I was brokering deals all over Florida. And that's what I did, was mortgages and sell and buy assets. And then started getting into the investment side. The second half of my career has been just purchasing investments and syndications and things of that nature. And I can tell you that the management has become something that I have learned how important it is, because whenever there was a problem with a property, it was 90% of the time it was a bad manager. I went with another statistic I made up. But it's usually the bad management, and it's frustrating because as an owner, you see it, you know what the problems are, but your hands are tied. What are you gonna do? Go in there, start firing people or hiring new people? So what are you really able to do besides the ultimate decision of firing your management company, which now you got to hire another one, and what if they're just as bad? And now you lost it. We fully understand the conundrum that ownership has when you have a bad manager and how bad that situation is. Like, we've lived it, we've been there. So that's why what we try to do is appeal to some of those problems and with our experience, figure out how we can help as best as we can, predict hurdles. And I think that's really what it boils down to, is having, in simple terms, proactive management as opposed to reactive, which is what, everybody else is out there is reacting. Oh, the market dropped. My property just lost 5%. Well, I guess it's time to run specials. By the time you're at 90%, it's too late. Like by the time you're at 90% and you now turn it around, that means you're going to drop to 85 before you finally see the fruits of your labor. So we turned on the spigot at 96%. And because we turned on the spigot for all these actions, then we got down to like 95, 94. It's already trending back to the right direction to 96, 97, where we're hoping to be at the end of February and March.
Well, and once property starts to go off the rails, and if you've got 100 units, I mean, you're looking at 6 months to get it back to where you want it to be. At a minimum, depending on how far off it is.
Yeah, big ships turn slow. Unfortunately, the bigger the ship, the slower it turns. Like that rule is also kind of accurate here. So that's pretty much the annual budget revision true up. That's the last one. That's just essentially every year, obviously around October, November. That's our budget season. We're always ahead of that as well. We like to get budgets by October.
Well, that note is actually for when we take over a property, we want to make sure that everybody's expectations are aligned, and we're telling you, yes, we're going to be meeting this budget that prior management company came up with, but because it matched your pro forma, this is actually us saying, hey, now that we've been here, this is really where we think we're going to be, and realistically, just to make sure that we align with ownership.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll open up for Q&A and
I've got a question on when an investor says, hey, I put a contract on these 100 doors. I want you guys to run the property.
That's our preferred thing to happen.
Okay, so they do that. All of a sudden, you guys start digging into the numbers. They're digging into the numbers. You guys are getting everything down. Have you ever gotten to a case where you get like 30 days before closing, and you're like, okay, investor, you're not going to like this,
Yes.
but this is not going to work. Have you ever had anybody back out after you've done all the work in that?
We work for a company that happens a lot. I mean, it's during your due diligence where you're going through and looking at all your numbers and finalizing it. And then, you get operations and sales together.
And there's two sides of that. And I said yes, prefer, because my ideal world is the day you put the perfect world is before you get your LOI submitted. That's the real perfect world. So like right now, us owning this company, before we submit a best and final, it's been vetted by us. We've looked at it. We're not giving it the fine tooth comb when you walk the property, which is we're talking two different things. There's the first part, which is what you have access to. You usually don't have access to a lot of stuff till you sign the contract, right? So you have your pre-contract phase where you get access to data, you get access to documents. We size those up. We get our CoStar reports. We walk the comparables. That's all the things we can do pre-contract getting signed. Now the contract gets signed, you get access to the property, you get to walk every single unit. We walk every unit of every single property we ever buy. I've never bought a property without walking every interior, unless it's a newer asset class. Like I might do 50% of if it's 2020 or newer at this point, 4 years old, and the reviews are all good online, it's not a lot of complaints on the property, then I'll usually walk 50% and take that sample to mean the rest of it's probably good. But on the older stuff, anything more than 10 years old or 20 years old, I'm really going to want to see every single unit. And if there's anything that's missing, because there's always like 20 or 30 units that you don't get into, I don't forget about them. Like I try to hey, I know I didn't get into these 20 or 30, but when am I getting in? And then what I'll do is after a week goes by, I'll send an email saying, I need to extend due diligence because I have not gotten into these 20 units. And then they usually get off their ass and get you into the units. So you just have to kind of follow you have to be comfortable with awkward moments is the best negotiating advice I ever got from somebody. If you can remain comfortable while things are awkward, you'll usually be a good negotiator.
But as a management company, if you have something under contract, you bring us in. We also will do due diligence. We'll charge a fee per door to go through and walk all of those units and, have a plumber come out and scope all the lines and look at the roofs and have a GC come out and check out, the buildings and everything else. And then at that point, I don't want to say it's not a big deal, but we are also making a fee off of that. So if you decide to pull out of that deal, it's not.
I was going to say, you have your safeguards for yourself,
right,
as the property management to
do
the due diligence in a way that you're not wasting all your time at a building, and the deal doesn't go through and you're not getting anything out.
Yeah, and that ranges anywhere from
yourself.
Yeah, and that fee will range anywhere from like $50 to $100 a unit, depending on how many. It's 1,000 units, probably be the $50 range. If it's 100 to 400 units, probably in the $100 range. Like Tessa said, we're going to get inside. So we use an app called Happy Code, which allows you to actually take pictures of every unit, right? And it's cool because you can go with a team of 10 people. Everyone has their downloaded app. Everyone has their assignments. You have unit 0 through 99, unit 100 through 199, and that's what they're going to do. And on their app, they're going to say unit 1, take a picture of the unit door, front door, take pictures of the inside of the units, and it documents it. And when all 5 of us are done, that app will combine everything into one giant PDF with pictures of every unit, with document the stuff we saw. We do the same thing for the exteriors. We do a full lease audit, as we mentioned, which we get all the leases, all the rent rolls, we compare them on an Excel. That'll capture all the variances if there are variances there. And then we do the financial audits on the building. So that's something that we do we offer that as a DD service. That 99% of the time segues into management because we did all the DD and we're the most prepared for this property. Why would you hire someone else? So for us, it's a segue item that we love to be involved at that point because it means that we're pretty confidently going to get the business at the end. But yeah, ideally in a perfect world, though, we're
You want
involved.
to get the most prepared property manager from the beginning, once you first start, start the contract.
And it does happen. To answer your question, it does happen a lot where you go into something with a pro forma and then something in the due diligence will pop up and surprise you. I want to say usually it's not a deal killer, but some things, like plumbing or whatnot.
What are the biggest things that people are missing on, especially in the last couple of years? Inflation, costs are going up, insurance, things like that. What are the biggest misses usually?
The two biggest misses that have happened to sponsors that I've been dealing with, right? Number one, killer, I think. And then number two is the cost of property insurance. Florida is an absolute disaster. Florida right now went from paying about $1,500 to $2,000 per unit to anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 on coastal cities. I looked at a deal that was inland, it was near Gainesville, brand new construction, still $2,800 a unit for insurance. Dallas went from being about $400 to $500 per unit to close to $1,000 right now.
Even the taxes also that aren't.
Even for new property, but I would say the things that are going to catch you off guard that are hard to predict. Well, not hard to predict, but you want to get ahead of them is insurance. Get it quoted right away. Send your quotes out right now. I advise everybody to get quoted before you submit an offer. Make sure you have an insurance quote on your hand. Scope the lines of the property. If it's an older asset, especially if it's a newer asset, you just want to do it just to catch any big clogs or things that might be there ahead of time. A lot of times buildings are backing up and it's just because there's a clog that's slowing down the water as it's draining out. So yeah, it could be roots, could be something clogged in there. You just need to hydro flush the pipe, clear it out, and you're good to go. But it's nice to identify that before you have a bunch of tenants with crap in their apartment. At that point, it's like a problem. If you can identify that beforehand, it's always good. But plumbing for sure, taxes, get your tax quoted. Arkansas is not that bad. Texas is an absolute nightmare. Texas is a non-disclosed state, which means that they become an aggressor because people aren't disclosing what the taxes are. So the county has overcompensated for that. And now you have people paying way more money for taxes than if they had just disclosed the sales price. So it's like that catch-22 where it's a non-disclosed state. You don't have to say what you're paying in property taxes. But now the counties are policing this so hard that they're coming. I mean, there's buildings that are getting assessments in Texas that make no sense whatsoever. So insurance, right? But I would say the number one deal killer besides, missed due diligence is going to be property insurance right now. And that's just really unfortunate. I don't consider interest rates as that because I feel like that's just, it's an equal playing field when it comes to interest rates, meaning interest rates are interest rates. We're all paying the same thing. We're all in the same ballpark. It's just a matter of whether you have floating rate debt or not. Obviously, if you had floating rate debt from 2021 to now, you're feeling a lot of pain. Your rate went from 4% to 8 or 9%. That's going to destroy any deal. I don't know any deals that survive 6% or 500 basis points. It's tough. It's really, really tough to get out of an interest rate scenario. The second thing is going to be your property insurance, which nobody saw that. I can tell you that's the one that's caught most of the people I know off guard has been property insurances because they've seen 100% increases, 150% increases on something that's $100,000 line. Like that's a tough pill to swallow. And I think that's the thing that I'm advising everybody right now. Get your insurance quoted as soon as possible because you're going to want to know what you're going to be paying on per door insurance. And then next year, increase it 5 or 10%. A lot of people would do these 2% increases for insurance, and we're not in that 2% world anymore. These days, when insurance goes up, it's going up 5, 10%, if at minimum. South Dakota, one of the reasons that I love to invest there because it's still that I found the lowest cost per state for insuring properties. The deal that we just closed, 2009 build, garden style apartments, and we're paying $377 a door on insurance, which like the bankers, the mortgage broker, everybody was like, wow. Like I haven't seen anything that cheap. So it's different. I believe Arkansas is pretty well off because you guys don't have any big natural disasters here. But
I know we have hail.
yeah, they have hail. That's about it. Florida, obviously hurricanes, big disaster.
Yeah, I think if any other questions, if we can, I know the speakers are gonna stay a little bit longer, definitely follow up with them one-on-one. We're gonna wrap up here. We wanna thank you both for traveling, quite far flying here, talk to us about this. So we really appreciate it. Hopefully all of you guys are checking. And just real quick about next month, we actually will have Mike Dooley speaking. So same second Tuesday at the same location. Mike Dooley will be talking about top 10 systems that creates $1 million transactions. If if you love numbers, talk about systems and processes, if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, executives, everything is based on systems this day. So love for you to be here. You can bring a friend if you like. And yeah, make sure, say hi in the Facebook group. I think that's about it. Anything else?
I guess, what's the best way for people to reach out?
Oh, that's what I call it. So our website is Elevate REM, Elevate Real Estate Management, but it's elevaterem.com. And you can send us a message from there. The emails go to me and Tessa. So any emails from that website will go directly to us. You can tell us, I met you at NWA, please call me, and I'll call you. You'll get a call from me on your phone. But yeah, any questions you guys have, like I said, you're looking at a property, you want some advice. I very much believe in giving away free info and letting it just come back to you naturally. So I'm a big you don't have to use us. We hope you do use us for services, but even if you just want somebody to bounce ideas off of or questions, we're happy to be that, person you can talk to for anything.